Hello, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Well, Hello Anxiety. I am your host, Dr. Jodi Richardson, and welcome to new listeners to the podcast, by the way, and a very warm welcome back, of course, to my weekly listeners. Just to let you know a little bit about me, I am very passionate about mental health, anxiety and well-being. I'm an anxiety and well-being speaker, author of Anxious Kids and Anxious Mums, and of course, host here on this podcast. You are going to love today's guest. I've been so looking forward to having another chat. I was lucky enough to be a guest on my guest's podcast. If you're still following me, you're doing very well. Tiffanee Cook is a woman who knows a thing or two about adversity and resilience. She is a boxing champion, a high-performance coach. She is a speaker, and she is host of the cleverly named podcast, Roll with the Punches. Tiff, thank you so much for being a guest on me and for putting me in the hot seat and you being a guest this time.
Jodi, you were wonderful on my show and the feedback was amazing. There's a handful of shows where even I go back and re-listen. I got so much great feedback on our conversation that I went back and listened.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel so good. I think,
in fact, you won't know this, but I actually, after the week after that, I released one of my short solo episodes talking about a story you shared at the very end that I found so profound and useful, in a really useful way. And I remember you telling a story. What was it about? It was about putting space between our thoughts.
Oh, yes.
Getting separation between our thoughts. And the way you articulated that was so incredible that I actually recorded an episode on it.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad that you are able to share that with me. It's so lovely to get that feedback. And like we're sitting here podcasting and listeners, Tiff and I can see one another, but I don't record the videos. So it's nice for Tiff and I to be able to see one another, but you record the podcast and the podcast goes out. It's published on Spotify and Google and Apple. And unless people like yourself, you're sharing something with me, or unless a listener leaves a review or writes an email or DMs something or puts a comment on social media, you don't always know how it's landing. And we do this, don't we, because we care so deeply about supporting people. So, oh my goodness, Tiff, thank you for letting me know. I so appreciate it. And perhaps I might do another episode about that particular idea, because when we have space between who we are and what we're thinking, it does just enable us to see that we're having a thought. We just don't get so swept away by them, because that's so easy for us to experience, especially those of us that have anxiety. It's so easy for us to get swept away by what we're thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, I literally, in the gym the next day, used it. I saw myself doing it and I used what you spoke about, and so it landed practically straight away.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
that
it was
makes me
so
feel
great.
So good. Oh
yeah.
Thank you, Tiff. Thank you. And listeners, when I met Tiff on her podcast, we just chatted like we had been besties forever, and you can probably tell by listening to us, we just think we're sort of on the same wavelength. So it's really lovely, and thank you for being a guest here. And I love what you're about, and Tiff, your podcast is just so extraordinary, and it's called Roll with the Punches. And on your website, you've got a statement that says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And, you know, you're a boxer and you use this beautiful metaphor of boxing to kind of talk about life. And I'd love for you to share more about that with us, please.
Boxing has literally changed my life from the moment I stepped in the ring. But as you read out that quote, I remembered a specific memory when I first started the training for my very first event. So I'll tell that story because that was a literal example. I got into boxing through, remember Paul Taylor had a gym called Acumotum, and he used to run an event called Executive Fight Club, and it was a corporate white-collar boxing event where any nuffy could jump in that boxing ring and have a go. And I happened to have listened to him do a talk on resilience up at the personal training academy in Paran, and we went down and had a tour of the gym, and there was this poster up, and of course, little girl that wants to be a little tomboy and do all the boy stuff, Tiff, took a look at this poster with people in suits, in gloves, punching on, and I was like, this is got to be me. Wow. So 2 weeks into that training, I had already sold 2 tables of tickets for people to come, and I sold the premium tickets because I wanted to make sure that, because I didn't think 20 people had come, so I thought they won't get an option of whether they get $200 tickets or $250. If they're going to put down that much, they're going to get $250, and they're going to sit at the front so that I can see them.
Way to lock yourself in.
I know. Well, this is the problem, Jodi. I locked myself in, and then within a couple of weeks, we're in the boxing gym, and we're partnered up. And I was partnered up with one of who is now a friend, Cindy, and we were learning. We were standing there with our gloves on our face, learning about the guard, and floating our glove out to our partner. And as they would float it out, we'd roll, and we'd learn how to block a punch. And obviously, it wasn't yet a real punch. However, at that point of training, I had what felt like a tennis ball size knot in my throat. I could not keep my eyes open or my head forward. And I remember just thinking, when this is over, I'm going out to my car to cry. When this is over, I'm going out to my car to cry. I was like, oh my goodness, I've sold 20 tickets to this stupid show and I can't even keep my eyes open, and it's not even a real punch yet.
Oh, so that was fear, was it? That was, your eyes were closed, the knot in your throat. Everything was about, I've signed up to this and I'm going to be facing this mock. Mock would be a good, no, it's just training, isn't it? It's just,
it's learning the technique, the technical side of how we block a punch. And the thing was, this become what I fell in love with about the sport so much, because what I didn't realise is, we're really, in life, I think we're really masterful storytellers. Life happens and we tell a story about it, and we happen to pick the story that makes us feel the best and is most comfortable and doesn't hold us too accountable. And so my story, which I had believed up until that point, and I was 29 by the time I was in that ring.
Right.
My story was, I'm independent and strong and I'm vivacious and I'm out there and I've moved from Tassie to Melbourne and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and now I'm going to jump in the boxing ring and watch me. Watch all the things I can do. I'm really strong and I don't need anyone. And then all of a sudden, when you're in that environment, your instincts speak first. Your body feels and reacts before your mind can tell any version of a story. And that was really a really terrifying space for me to be in, and perplexing, and like, that was the 12 weeks of training, was basically walking in with me on my own shoulder, whispering into my ear, you are the worst person in this gym, this is embarrassing.
Oh.
But just showing up and doing it anyway, and ignoring what I thought or what I thought people thought.
Yeah.
And stepping into the uncomfortable. Funnily enough, I have and had, or maybe at some point I reflected back and realised that I think I have a real relationship with adversity that is positive. I've developed that through the fact that the actions that I've taken and the learnings that I've taken and the things that have developed in me from any adversity that's happened are really positive. So it tends to be a space of springboarding for me. And if we talk later about when COVID happened, which was another life experience that I got a lot out of, that was exactly what happened there. And these moments come up where you go, like, this should be terrifying, but it ends up being the silver lining. It ends up being something that allows us to cope really well, which is great when it comes to anxiety. And sport's a great place to look at this, because what is anxiety in sport? It's the same feeling that allows our body to perform, to hone in, to be sharp, to see things, to respond, to feel less until we have the safe capacity to feel. And then that starts, I guess, to get into that sticky territory of making sure that we are allowing ourselves to feel and honour what we feel.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that went deep quickly, didn't it?
It did, but it's so powerful, because, like you say, and I do want to come back to this 12 weeks of training and because I think everyone's like me, they're going, well, hang on. And so let's park that for the moment. So I I love that you've talked about that idea, because in the moment, exactly as you said, when we're anxious, we are geared up, prepared and honed in to deal with what's happening in the present moment. And then, like you say, if we don't allow ourselves the time to sort of reflect and experience what we've been through and understand and process what we've been through, it can be the difference very much on a grander scale between, different types of responses. And it sounds to me like what you've learned, and obviously over a long period of time, you've experienced post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
Because some people will come out of the other side of a traumatic experience and operate at a very different level in a more positive way than they did beforehand. And everybody's experience is different. So, but I do want to go back. So can you take us back? You've sold these tables. You are training and you are having a lot of self-doubt. You're having a lot of self-talk, self-defeating talk. Talk us through what happened, because I am busting to know.
Yeah, and last night I made a new realisation, and that was I happened to be thinking weirdly about this first fight experience, and I thought to myself, like, I didn't know anyone. I was new at that gym. I didn't even know anyone, which again adds a layer. I'm so familiar now with who I know from that time and the relationships we have. So adding to that, I've forgotten about the fact that I'd actually walked into this gym that I was not a member of, where I knew nobody, and it was this basement boxing gym, and I said, yes, I would like to fight, and trust that these, and going into it with these people and building trust and learning skills. But so 12 weeks of changing absolutely everything. So we trained between 3 and 5 days a week. I think there were 3 structured training and then 2 other classes that we would opt in for. Yep. We didn't do any actual sparring until quite late in the piece, which was interesting. And what was really interesting is about that, you don't know who you, like, you can watch, you're one person when you train under pressure, and you're a different person when you spar, and you're a different person when you fight, because you're in these 3 different states. And that was really interesting, because when we did our first bit of sparring, the trainer, one of the trainers, came over and he goes, "Hey, is that your first time sparring?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Is it? Are you sure?"
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I think I'd know.
Yeah, right. So everyone, including myself, I knew that I was pretty uncoordinated and pretty useless. But a lot of that, I think, when we have that narrative about ourselves, it comes out in our performance. So I feel that I thought I was a bit useless, so I would underperform. And I would be, and that nervousness and that anxiety about my performance and that imposter syndrome, but I would just do it anyway. So then when you hop into sparring, again, there's no room for those thoughts. That narrative the narrative disappears, because you're just in there and there's a new person driving the bus, and it's like, oh, hello, well, this is okay. This new driver's got me.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. We did that twice before that, but I guess what was big about that 12 weeks was everything outside of the gym as well. Like, you're turning up to those sessions, but also I was absolutely consumed by the thoughts and the training and the changes I had to make in, nutrition, not drinking any alcohol. Not that I drank a lot, but I would often go out for dinner with my dad and have a glass of wine. Yeah. And I remember that was such an ingrained habit that, weirdly, I remember inviting Dad for dinner one night, and he said, no, he asked me to come out for dinner, and I was like, I don't know if I will, because I can't have a wine.
Right, so the idea this is all off the table.
Yeah, because I was like, this is a bit weird. Why would I go out if I can't have a glass of wine? That's just too weird, because it was just such a deeply ingrained habit. So it just shows, I think, all of these things that just become hardwired and stories that we buy into, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And did you go out for dinner?
I did. You did. And then I developed
dinner.
It got to a point where I'd sometimes have to, after that, I'd have to remind myself, Tiff, it's okay. You're not in fight training right now. You could have a glass of wine,
Yes, yes. Did you stand a bit taller? Did you walk a little bit taller because you were building this this confidence and this strength. And quite frankly, as a woman, you were building the skills to defend yourself. Did you find that translated into your confidence outside of the ring?
I'm going to say maybe not consciously, and from 2 points. I remember people often asking me when they'd meet you and you say you do boxing, and, oh, you must feel all right on the streets, looking after yourself. And I never felt any more well-equipped in that situation because they were two completely different things. This space of the boxing ring for me was never fighting. It was this really methodical, meticulous thing that I was doing that had no relationship with hitting a person or hurting a person.
Yes. It was a sport.
So then when you're in a situation where you would think about, well, at least I could defend myself, I would be a mile up the road already, running on my little legs.
Your fitness would carry you away.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
True.
So the evening of I presume it was an evening. I'm making that assumption. The evening of the event. Talk us through that, because you are, and look, just for listeners who are not familiar with me and my story, I had 7 years of karate training, and I know that you know this, Tiff, and that I competed in one competition in 2 fights. And what you said before about training, sparring and competing, you are a different person. I competed in 2 fights and decided that was enough for me. So I know that experience, I know that feeling. But talk us through, you've got at least half a dozen to a dozen people there supporting you, there for you. You've challenged yourself to compete in a sport that you're very new to, and here you are fronting up at this event. How did you cope with the anxiety in the lead up, and how did it all go?
All right. So we weigh in 24 hours before, so the day before, and I remember being there and chatting, and I was like, I'm good. Weirdly fine. And then I went to bed that night, and it was like I just ping, eyes wide open, and I could not sleep. And I remember weirdly having a chiropractor appointment in the morning just for a final tune-up. And I think I text my chiropractor at 4 a.m. to say I won't be coming in because I haven't slept yet. And I think I went to sleep at 6 a.m. And my alarm went off at 7 for me to go and pick my mother up from the airport, who was proudly coming to watch her daughter fight.
Okay.
Now, I picked her up from the airport, and the whole day was just me being so socially inept because I was so overwhelmed with the feeling of anxiety. I'd never, ever felt like this before. It was this weird, spaced out, sitting at a cafe, staring into the abyss with my heart racing and not even looking at her when I spoke. It was just like, I'm really sorry. And I remember saying, I will never, ever in my life do anything like this again, because nothing could be worth how I feel today.
Really?
And I meant every word. I'd never felt like that, and I was never going to let myself feel like it again. And then we turn up to the event. My friend was fighting on the first fight, so I was sitting there watching her. She won. That was exciting. I was like, yes, we're the winning team. And then they hand her the microphone and she gives her victory speech. And I went into another state of turmoil thinking, I can't speak in front of 1,000 people on a stage. Like, there's already TV cameras, and this was like a Foxtel event. Like, they'd streamed it on Foxtel, this particular one. I was like, there's just no way I can. So I'm in turmoil. I don't want to win. I don't want to lose. I'm terrified. This is going on. Someone comes, taps me on the shoulder, they laugh, they go, your opponent's outside warming up, doing sprints, which I thought was weird, and I laughed at them. They go, no, I'm actually serious. You're on in a minute. So I get shoved off into just swept up, pushed into the change rooms, mouth guard shoved in my mouth, hands wrapped up, song gets played, and next thing I'm walking out, and the whole thing just felt surreal. I was definitely in an overwhelmed state.
Yeah.
So there's these snippets of moments and there's just big gaps that I can only fill in because I've watched the video. And the snippets, I remember putting my leg through the rope standing, coming through, putting my hands in the air when they introduced me, and then just turning around and waiting. They hit the bell and we go in, and I remember it was probably 15 to 20 seconds in, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, this is so hard and so full on, and I cannot keep this pace up. Do I really want to do this as a thing? Do I really want to do this sport?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be able to keep up the whole 3 rounds like this. Maybe I'll have to focus on defence. Now, I didn't have any defence. So it went from me flailing around at a sprinter's pace to wearing a few punches and going, okay, that doesn't work, back to option A, back into it. And then I'm in the corner getting in trouble from my coach. He's going, what are you doing? And I'm like, what? He goes, you don't stop until the ref stops you. So apparently, and all of this, like I said, it's all it's semi-unconscious. I didn't realise some of these actions. I wasn't choosing these actions.
Yeah.
But when she stopped fighting or cowered or turned or covered, I would kind of stop the attack, waiting for my playmate to come back.
Waiting for her to regain her composure.
Yes.
And okay, whereas he's just like, don't let up. Oh, gosh, yeah. Which goes against the grain, doesn't it?
Yeah, super weird. And then the 3rd round, at some point, unbeknownst to me at the time, that the bell rings and I'm kind of looking around what's going on and realise that they've TKO'd it and I've won the fight. Hands in the air, microphone shoved in my hand, could not shush me at all. Like I don't even know what I said. You could not get that mic out of my hands. Like, when's the next event? Which tells me that the feeling I felt before, which was bigger than anything I'd ever felt, was paled in comparison to everything that awaited what was on the other side of that.
Yes. Oh,
and I just got goosebumps thinking about it.
Oh, I know, yeah.
I remember the next memory was standing in front of the ring. I'd gone, had a shower out the back and frocked up and grabbed myself a celebratory wine, and I was just kind of zoned out watching the next fight and just going, this is it. This is anything in life. This is any goal. Any goal is 12 weeks of trying to find your own self-belief, imposter syndrome, anxiety, getting hurt, getting punched in the face, fear, all of the things. 12 weeks. Changing the way that you live, changing the way that you eat, changing all of the habits, going against the grain for 4.5 minutes of glory, and then it's over. And 4.5 minutes that actually, aside from a bit of yahooing in the corner, actually doesn't mean anything to anybody but me.
Yes.
But it means, so it was like understanding, I guess at that time for me, I was thinking from a business perspective. I was like, if there's anything I want, I've got to make sure I really want it and I know why, because that's how much work to glory ratio there is. There's this 12 weeks and then there's this moment.
So you've got this 12 weeks of training, working hard, and this commitment, and then this experience in the ring that is unlike anything, just sheer, overwhelming, pure exhilaration. And then I imagine that the focus very quickly came onto, well, what's next? Where am I going to take this next? But I really just want to acknowledge the fact that something that you said before, when you felt that anxiety in the lead up because you were doing something very new and something very few people put their hand up to do. And a lot of people listening will be thinking, why boxing? Because there's so much risk and pain and physical kind of threat to you when you front up for that. But this idea that despite how you felt, you didn't let it stop you. And that's what happens so much, because that anxiety, that feeling, it's a very strong feeling because our brain is working very, very hard to say, don't do this. This is dangerous. And so you were able to tolerate that despite how hard it was, and you didn't think you'd ever put yourself through it again. But you were able to also recognise that what was on the other side of what you did was worth every second. And I wonder and I predict that future fights have been obviously still going to bring up anxiety because that's arousal. That's about preparing yourself. We need a Goldilocks zone, don't we? If we don't have enough anxiety, we're asleep. If we have too much, we can't perform. We need this kind of middle, just right level of anxiety. But since that experience when you at a coffee with your mum after picking her up from the airport, has the anxiety been as great? And if it has, what helps to kind of help you move through it so that you can still do what really, really matters to you?
A yes and a no on has it been as great. So I would say it's been every bit as great, but my relationship with it has been very different.
Yeah.
I remember after having a big break for 3 years and going back in 2019 and having my first fight, and I was trying to reenact the little, the lucky undie kind of theory, like reenact the little things that
the undie theory?
Lucky undies. You've got to wear your lucky undies on game day.
Thank you. I wasn't following.
If that's not already a theory, I've just put it in the new theory book. It's like red car theory. This is lucky undie theory.
Thank you.
So I remember buying the exact same little energy gels to have right before, or jelly beans right before the fight to get that. And what was interesting is I had over-indexed myself on being hyped up and excited and all of the things. I kind of had an adrenal dump. Now, I won that fight, but I felt the effects of what I'd done in the lead up, and that was just that underlying trying to control and make things the same as before. I was never going to be the same fighter as before. I'd done so much therapy in the 3 years before that I knew related heavily to some of the aspects of myself that as a boxer made me were positive as a boxer. Things like the ability to feel in there, the ability to, or not ability, well, yeah, ability to dissociate. I'd learned over the years that there was a level of that happening, and what I see in the boxing ring is what I see in my life. So when I looked at that in the boxing ring, and I decided, and I saw it in my life, and I decided I wanted to go and address that, I remember asking myself, what do you want to do with boxing? Do you want to be a great boxer? Do you want to give boxing a shot? Or is it more important that you live as a healthy, functional human? Do you want to function better emotionally? So I pulled that lever, and in 2019 went back to fighting, and I remember distinctly the first sparring session with John Manu down in Dandenong, and I go into training, and I hadn't done any sparring for years, and we're in this, dark, dark kind of intimidating boxing gym with a bunch of blokes I didn't know, and we were all doing round robin with John, who was gearing up for a fight, and he's a southpaw as well that hits like a freight train. He hits so hard. And I got in there, I was like, who am I going to be in the boxing ring now? And I got in there, and he hit me pretty quick with an uppercut that I was sure broke my nose.
Oh.
It didn't, but I wore at least three of those uppercuts. But what shook me the most was I felt emotion and I felt awareness, and I literally compare it to feeling like I was naked in front of 1,000 men in that boxing ring, because I knew that I was feeling emotion and having a reaction to that, and I felt like people could see that. Right. And I didn't experience that before, because I had this level of dissociation and this poker face that you couldn't tell if you hurt me. You couldn't tell anything that was going on, because I had that stuff bunkered down.
Yes, yes. And so how has that changed you as an athlete? I know how I can predict how it's changed you as a person. You'll be a lot healthier mentally and emotionally because of your ability to feel your feelings. But how did that change for you how did that change things for you in the ring?
So it changed the ability to commit to punches and not flinch. So I had a lot more trouble with staying inside and not flinching back. And even when I threw the punches, there was that tendency to you don't see it until you film yourself and actually analyse what you're doing. But yeah, I remember one sparring session with one of the guys, and it was the first time I'd overcome that, and I'd stayed inside, and I'd got hit, a big hit to the eye socket, and straight up the top of my eye, like I just felt it and saw it. It was just like boom, when the top of your head just gets a big egg on it. So my eye was bleeding, and that had popped up. But I'd stayed inside, and I'd thrown some really good shots and landed them. And so I've stepped out of the ring, and I looked at my coach, and I go, you don't even need to tell me that was good. That was good. Which, mate, as I said it, I knew how funny it sounded. It's like, Tiff, half your face is hanging off. You clearly weren't the one with the upper hand here. But this is what boxing is. It's this ability that it's me against me. Like, can I go in there and overcome that one thing? Like, of course, he's stronger than me. He's more experienced than me. He should have the upper hand. But what can I control in a situation and what do I want to control in a situation? How objective can I be about the outcome when it happens? And that's the aspect that I love about. And another really big lesson I learned out of that was what I took out of that change in there was self-love. That was caring more about myself than just the ability to walk into anything. I would not always, most of the time I would, but if I was told to do X, Y, Z in training, and I felt that was like that cut that I had on my eye, we went in the next day, and he's like, I'll pop your mouth guard in and do some sparring with John. I was like, I've got a cut on my eye. I don't really want to get my eye ripped out. Yeah. So I said no to that. Yeah. And I would normally have just gone in and done it because you don't argue, you just do it. And I was like, no, I don't need to do that, and I'm going to advocate for me because I'm important now. And I just don't think I ever thought that before.
How did you find the right psychologist to support you after you took the break from boxing? Because you, as you said, you pulled that lever. You wanted to really function in a healthier way. Yeah. So what was that like, trying to find the right person? Because I know there are a lot of listeners who will be looking for a psychologist or who are perhaps seeing somebody, a counsellor or a psychologist they don't feel is quite the right fit. Yeah. Talk us through that.
Big, long journey, I think. I'm the psychologist I see today. I love him. He started off as a podcast guest, and he is 100% like it's brilliant when you find that person. And that person is not always the only thing you need, I don't think. And they might not be the person that gets you from point A to point Z. They might get you to C, and then you got to find the next thing. Like for me, it's been a dance of talk and somatic therapies and juggling those around. I was very heavily pushed towards somatic at the start, and I just wouldn't lean into it.
Talk to us about that, because there are probably many listeners who haven't heard the term somatic therapy before.
Yeah, well, I might get it wrong if I explain it like this, but I mean, somatic therapy is more that kind of feeling and understanding that the more sensory experiences. So, for example, one of the first person I ever spoke to in a hypothetical sense about what I had. So at 29 years old, I asked myself, why am I coming into this space? What's going on? Why do people ask if getting punched in the face is scary? And if I'm saying, no, it's not, then what's scary to me? And I kept, because I would go from one thing to the next. But for some reason, I didn't feel good at this sport. Despite a win, I didn't feel good, but I was still coming back to it. And that piqued my curiosity. Like, what's going on? And when I stumbled across the thoughts around vulnerability and being seen, I could feel it in my body. I was like, that's what I'm scared of. I'm actually scared of dropping the mask. And that mask falls off when I'm in the boxing ring, and it's a bit terrifying, but I need to know who lives underneath that, because I've lost touch, and I only know that person. I only know the facade, which is a dangerous place to be, because when you have a rough time, when something happens or you burn out, I remember a time when I don't know what was going on in life, but I was tired and I was upset, and I remembered falling to my knees in the lounge room upset about something. I was like, I don't even know who to reach out to, because everyone just thinks I'm this happy, mouthy, chatty, but everyone has believed the Tiff show. Even I did, but that's underneath, there's someone else.
Yes.
hanging out.
Yes. And who can I trust to share that part of me with?
Yeah. So first person I confided in a hypothetical sense about, hey, if this happened to this in somebody's childhood, if this scenario happened and now they were 30, would they be all right? And they thought I was talking about someone else. They were a good friend of mine, clinical psychologist, and she said, oh, no, they haven't dealt with anything. And then a few weeks later, they asked me if I was referring to a particular mutual friend, and I was like, no, I was talking about me, and they were mortified.
Oh.
But they gave me a referral, and I like to joke that my first psychologist broke up with me because we had one session and she referred me on.
Well, that's hard. That's very harsh. That would be very hard to take. You're already very
vulnerable. So I'm there
vulnerable.
to talk about relationships and abandonment and disconnection, and she's like, yeah, I don't want to see you anymore.
Oh, no, Tiff. I'm so sorry that happened. I'm sorry I'm laughing, but I'm laughing because you're laughing.
It wasn't a bad thing. I still wasn't.
Wasn't the right fit.
Yeah, well, look, I still wasn't probably emotionally. No, not probably. I was not emotionally open enough for that to at that. I was still very in my head with the story and the logic, and that stuff wasn't very triggering for me. But the next one was she sent me to a Radix therapist. Radix therapy, I've never heard of it apart from this lady, but that was I remember we'd do a bit of talking, but she'd always want me to hit a pillow, and I would be like, I'm not hitting a pillow. I punched a boxing bag at the gym. I'm not doing that. But I remember one exercise she did with me that I can share, and she laid me down. She goes, we're going to do an exercise in initiation. I think it was initiation, and she goes, so you're going to lay down on the ground, and I'm going to kneel beside you at about shoulder level, and you're going to close your eyes, and it's all up to you setting a boundary of what you're comfortable with. And if you want to open your eyes, then you open them. And if you want touch, then you could take my hand off my knee and you put it just on your shoulder. And then when you've had enough, you take it off. So she was talking me through this process. She goes, we'll put a time limit on it. We'll put, I don't know if it was 10 or 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, righto, down we go. And I remember maybe 3 times attempting, and this frightened me because I hadn't felt like this. This was such an unexpected experience. But 3 times I went to open my eyes, and before, just as the slit of light showed through, they snapped shut again, and I would panic, and I was like, what's that about? Agency and setting boundaries and having needs and expressing them and asking like a bid for connection. It was weird. Didn't continue with her for very long, and sought out another psychologist who said to me after 5 sessions, everyone that's listening is like, oh, is this the journey? It is quite humorous. But he said we had 5 sessions, and I'm like, I go in, I go, all right, so this happened when I was a kid, and this is what I think's going, this is areas I'm struggling. Do your thing. And session 5, he's like, okay, Tiff, so normally by the time, and this was a sports psychologist as well, as a clinical psychologist, normally by session number 5, I have a real sense of who someone is and what they need, and I'm just not getting that from you.
Wow.
And that just hung in the air, and so at that point I'm still of the belief that a psychologist goes to school and they learn what's wrong, and then they will tell you what's wrong with you, and they'll fix you, and you'll be like everybody else. That was still the mindset of that's how therapy works. Like, I come in, I'll tell you, you like tickety boo, away we go. Tiff's got no problems anymore. And so, yeah. And like I said, since then I had a couple of other talk therapy psychologists which were good, and did a little bit of somatic therapy, and currently see Dr. Bill a lot, and I'm in a really good place now, but just I get more out of therapy when I'm not in a crisis. Just in terms of, hey, how do you think, what's on your mind, how do you behave, how have you changed? Like, every time I would go to therapy, I'd think, I don't even know I'm going because there's nothing going on and I don't know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
And nothing's changed. And then we'll have a conversation and we'll talk about a scenario, and they're like, oh, that's very different to how you would have. And they go, yeah, that is really different to how I would have. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yes.
So I think it's only when we get out of wherever we currently are far enough to look back a little bit to see how far we've progressed. I was like that with boxing training as well.
It takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. And your journey, I'm so glad that you persevered, because it's a particularly rocky journey for you and isn't it that particular experience that you had laying down, and sometimes that can put a person in a very vulnerable position, and if it's not the right time, or you don't have the right strength of relationship with the psychologist or whoever's working with you, it can feel very, very strange and very something that can sort of make you think, oh, I don't know if this is quite the right fit for me. And then sometimes people will think, oh, psychology, this kind of help is not for me. But I thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing those, the rocky start. And it's like a friendship. It's like any relationship. I'm not talking romantic, but any relationship, it's got to be the right fit. I always talk about the right psychologist being like the right pair of jeans. You had to try on quite a few to find the right fit. For me, it was my third. My first psychologist was just at the clinic where I was at the GP, where I was diagnosed with depression. And this person very early in the piece wanted to do, I can't think of the name of the strategy, but wanted me to sort of role play being a child, being little primary school age Jodi. That just felt really weird and very difficult and very vulnerable and confronting and so I was like, oh, this is not for me. And then the second was somebody recommended, I thought she was a psychologist, but she actually wasn't. I was just going on a recommendation, and she wanted to talk about my dreams, and that didn't feel like a good fit for me. And so I was like, oh, this is, I really know I desperately need help. And I was so thankful to, eventually I found my guy, and the right person makes all the difference. And I love to hear you say too that you don't always have to go in and have some sort of a crisis. It's really important to have the regular contact. And I'm curious though, I know when I saw my psychologist what the relationship was in terms of the start of each session. Who spoke first for you, or who speaks first? Does Dr. Bill wait for you to speak? And
we tend to have a little bit of banter first. Yeah. And then he'll either say, how's your world, or what's on your mind today?
Yeah.
It's really funny when we especially at the beginning, when we'd get into some vulnerable conversations, it's really interesting what other people see in you, and he would refer to it as growing down. He's like, did you feel that? How old do you feel right now? I'd say an answer. So there were two things that happened. One was a response, and I wouldn't notice until he made me aware of it. Now I notice. I go, oh, I felt myself grow. What am I relating that to? Who do I become? How old am I when I'm, and what might that be about? This growing down, and the other thing was I don't know. So what was funny is we had two really confronting podcasts. One, I got him on to talk about his story, a book he'd written, and I mentioned my backstory and childhood, and boom, he grabs that like a bull by the horns, and in his very, upfront way. And it was a great but confronting episode, and I put it live 4 weeks later. Normally my episodes go live in 3 days. I didn't even realise that it had been 2 weeks before I'd opened the file to edit, another 2 weeks before it went live, and I was really tentative because I'm like, some of the things he said were it was like, what are people going to think? If, like, I'm putting a podcast out, and also he talks about my parents' parenting, and I love my parents, and they're going to listen to my show. And what is their experience going to be about how he's talking about this and how they perceive that? So there was so much to think about and navigate. I had him on a second time, and then I said, "Are you taking clients?" And we get to the first therapy session. I said, "I'm going to pretend this is a podcast, because in podcasting I have this innate ability to be vulnerable and open, and not shrink into that space of how old are you, or I don't know."
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me because I noticed when I started my podcast, it was like a new boxing ring. It was a new playground, and it was a playground for vulnerability, the one thing that used to terrify me. And it was happening there naturally. And as in the boxing ring, the stuff I worked on in there flowed out into my life. And in the podcast, the things I work, the opening up and sharing and connecting in there is flowing out into my own life. It's like a practice field, I guess, which is really cool.
It is, and you're just extraordinary. And when I was a guest with you, I just adore everything about you. I really admire you. I think you're incredibly inspiring. I thank you for trusting me to support your community, and I can't thank you enough for sharing so openly and vulnerably here with me and my community. And just one last question before I ask you to share with our listeners how they can connect with you and your amazing work. After a conversation like this, I know sometimes I get what Brene Brown will call a vulnerability hangover. Like there've been sometimes I've done a presentation, and especially in the early days when I was developing my work as a speaker, sometimes I'd just go into a little bit of overshare, just a little bit, step over that line, pull myself back, learning as I go. And sometimes I'd walk away and I'd come home and I would just be in this vulnerability hangover, which is just it's so nice to have words for it. Just this idea of, did I say too much? How did that come across? What are people thinking? That kind of second guessing and questioning, and that kind of that feeling that doesn't feel so good. And I was going to ask you this off air, but I think I'm going to ask you this now. How do you think you'll go once we part ways, having been here with me and sharing your story and being so open to really support listeners today?
I'm really good with it now because because I've practiced it and I do it.
Yeah.
But I know the first times that I did it, the first time Craig and we asked me on a show in 2020 or 2021 what was I referring to, and I said it, and we had a 3-minute conversation. That felt huge. That first conversation with Bill felt huge, but huge in a good way. And I think what the difference is, and a good thing for people listening that are maybe at a space or would like to be at a space where speaking and sharing, even if it's just to one person or a friend, or even if it's journaling, sharing is really therapeutic and healing, but just asking the intention. And so I have such a respect for what I have gained from what I've experienced. So I remember journaling before I'd ever shared this with anybody. I was journaling by myself, and I was sitting in my little nook at home and writing about this experience as a child and this person that I was writing about. And midway through the sentence, I said, actually, I think maybe I should thank this. But now I didn't choose to write that. I still stand to this day. Those words just came from me. I was writing something else, because obviously we hold fear and resentment and hurt when we're having to deal with adversities that have happened.
Yes.
And confront them. But halfway through, my pen just writes, I think I should thank this guy, because look at me. Look how strong and independent. Look at the stuff I've done. And yeah, I've just pulled the rug back and learned of some things that I've gotten a bit too protective with, I'd like to get better at vulnerability and connection and trust and all of those things, that can enrich my life. But look, I wouldn't swap it back. So I think, when it comes to sharing and opening up, what's our relationship with our story first? And I guess just making sure that within that you're choosing the appropriate place and conversation and way to share it. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Aidan?
It absolutely does. It does. And what a powerful perspective that you have grown into, because I know it's taken time. I know it will have been painful. It's taken a lot of time and energy. And I heard something on a podcast the other day that in someone's in someone else's heart, there's a hole in the shape of your words. And isn't that just so powerful? And I know that talking with you today on the podcast, that your experiences and your journey after, traumatic experiences in your childhood, where you are now, the woman that you are, the work that you do, and the growth that you've experienced and how you share that with others. I'm just really grateful to you for sharing that with us. And I'm glad to know that after our time together that you'll be reflective and you'll take care of yourself and that you'll be okay. And for listeners, I'd love for you to share, please, Tiff, how can listeners connect with you? I love that your website is Tiffanee & Co, but Tiffanee is spelled Tiffanee. I love that you've grabbed that URL. So how else can listeners find you and work with you?
My first client was a lawyer, a business lawyer, and I said, can I have the business name Tiffanee & Co, because my name is spelt differently? And he's like, yeah. And then years later, he's like, I go, they couldn't sue me, could they? And he goes, imagine the exposure you'd get. I'm like, are you stitching me up? So you can go to tiffaneeandco.com.au or rollwiththepunches.com.au. We'll take you to the same space.
Yeah.
And wherever you're listening to this, you can find Roll With The Punches podcast. And I'm on Instagram sharing a lot about my dog and cat. And those.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Tiff. Thank you again. I really am very grateful to you. It takes courage. And I know that you are, just through sharing and telling your story. And oh my gosh, I mean, stepping in that ring, there'll be listeners who have hopes and dreams and aspirations and things they want to do that probably terrify them, because the most exciting things do, who I know are going to be able to take another step forward because of listening to you and being connected with you. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Thank you for sharing these conversations with me and my incredible guests. I'm always so grateful to you, and I cannot wait to be back with another episode next week. In the meantime, take time each day to savor the good, experience how you feel, and enjoy lots of nature, lots of exercise, and lots of mindful moments. I will see you next week. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.